please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Those were the headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. You're watching CNBC TV18. I'm Arundhati Ramnan and this is Reporter's Diary. Straight to the big story at this hour, RBI Governor Urjit Patel has broken his silence over the PNB fraud. In a speech delivered at the National Law University, Gandhinagar, Patel defended the RBI and said that it is simply infeasible for a banking regulator to be in every nook and corner of banking activity. He went on to add that RBI's regulatory powers over public sector banks are much weaker than those over the private sector banks. Ritu Singh joins in with more on Governor Patel's defense. Ritu, take us through the highlights of Urjit Patel's speech.
Well, Arundhati, it was a very emotional and, if you go through the speech, very power-packed speech, really, where the governor is making a case as to why the Reserve Bank of India has its hands tied when it comes to public sector banks, and that there is not any level playing field between the regulation for private and public sector banks. It says the Banking Regulation Act itself limits the activities of the Reserve Bank of India when it comes to taking strict action to control frauds such as the Punjab National Bank fraud that has come to light, following which the governor argues a lot of criticism has been laid and, fingers have been pointed at the Reserve Bank of India for not catching the fraud in its supervisory role. But RBI has come out in a strong defense saying it is impossible for the regulator to be in every nook and corner of the banking, system as a whole. There are several arguments that Governor Patel has laid out in this very long speech that he gave in Gandhinagar in Gujarat today. He started by saying, investigative formal enforcement processes do take a lot of time in India, and data on fraud suggests very clearly, and this is something they say that RBI has been highlighting to banks for quite some time, there is hazard, from frauds such as those emanating from LOUs, and it had on 3 instances tried to warn banks starting 2016 to strengthen their internal systems and, cyber security risks that they face, but they said not much has been done by the banks in terms of taking action on all these warnings issued by the Reserve Bank of India. He says, when you compare frauds happening in the public sector banks versus the private sector banks, frauds are much lesser in private sector banks, not because of any other reason, but because unlike the public sector banks where the tenure and the appointment is made by the government, here private banks worry about their position to go to the markets to raise capital if their image is hurt. In fact, the CEOs would even worry if the board would take away their seat the next day if such a fraud were to occur. And therefore, there is more incentive with the private sector banker to ensure such frauds are leaked and there is better governance system in place. He also goes on to say that market discipline mechanism for public sector banks is very weak when you compare it to the private peers. The government, which is the principal shareholder in public sector banks, has so far not been interested in fundamentally modifying ownership structure of the bank. A clear case where he's making where the government should relook at the ownership mechanism in the banks itself, perhaps hinting at some more privatization that is to come, for public sector banks, better efficiency. It says, even things like prompt corrective action. And he says, in an example, he quotes that managing directors and chiefs of public sector banks candidly admit to the media that business is as usual, even though the banks are under prompt corrective action from the regulator. And he's appalled at these statements saying, little action is being taken by public sector banks and RBI just has to stand and watch from a corner because, as it says, under the BR Act, its hands are tied. Several other things that the governor has highlighted. I mean, I can go on, but lastly, he's also argued for the 12th February circular, which he says, which is on NPA resolution, where a lot of criticism has come for several, specific points in the circular. And he's saying that bank frauds and NPAs are very closely linked. And the new circular highlights really what can be done to better tackle NPA resolution, linking it to what he says is the most important credit reform in the country in the last several decades, that is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. And therefore, he says adoption of such a mechanism will eventually help strengthen public sector banks. And he also ends with various suggestions for the government, the steps that they can take to improve the efficiency of public sector banks.
All right, Ritu. So that's the big story at this hour. Urjit Patel defending the RBI in the PNB fraud case. Thank you so much, Ritu, for taking us through the highlights of his speech. Moving on to all the action from Dalal Street, it was a comeback of sorts for the markets which witnessed a strong rally in the last hour of trade. After a weak start to the session, the Nifty managed to reclaim 10,400 after breaching the level intraday. Sensex ended almost flat with a negative bias. Anuj Singhal joins us now to decode today's trading action. Anuj, the bulls fought back in the last hour of trade.
Well, good day for the bulls today, and I say that because even though the Nifty ended in the red and so did the Sensex, there was big recovery led by the banks, and today was a day the market could have easily gone down about 100 points on the Nifty. It chose not to do that, in fact recover all of the lost ground. The UP bipole was really the market's worst fear come true, and still the market moved on. Mid-caps outperformed, of course. The advanced decline was quite decent, so things were looking good. Banks had a powerful short covering move, especially the beaten down ones. SBI, ICICI and Axis, they led that move in the bank Nifty. Other Nifty gainers included Tech Mahindra, Ambuja Cement and Maruti. On the losing end, though, you had some big names like IOC, which is going ex-bonus tomorrow, HPCL, HDFC and ITC, and Bharti and Tata Steel. It was a day of PSU banks, though, led, of course, by the usual suspect, IDBI Bank, up about 12%. OBC, Syndicate Union were the other big gainers. And towards the end, there was some big buying in high beta names. JP Associates, Dish TV, Sun TV, you could perhaps add United Spirits as well. Big buying in a lot of mid-caps or sort of non-indexed large-cap names in trade. All in all, the market has respected the lows. Will be interesting to see if at higher level there is some resistance which is back.
So the markets are recovering in the last hour of trade today. Thank you so much for taking us through those details, Anuj. The other top story this evening, the government today got the Lok Sabha to approve the budget for the upcoming fiscal without any discussion. The Finance Bill 2018, which highlights the government's tax proposals, as well as the appropriation bill that contains details of various government department spendings, were passed by a voice vote. This amid a uproar by the opposition parties. They have criticized the government, accusing it of trying to pass the finance bill without discussion. Rituparna Bhuyan joins us now. Rituparna, there are as many as 21 amendments and 3 new clauses in the finance bill. Take us through the key highlights.
Well, unprecedented scenes in Lok Sabha in the past 8 days of this session. Not much business has been conducted, and that perhaps forced the government to take this unprecedented step. Firstly, of deciding to club all the demand for grant proposals, which basically relates to expenditure of the government, and this process is known as the guillotine process. So everything was passed in one go through a voice vote, and then secondly, without any discussion, the finance bill, which has the tax and the revenue proposals of the government for the budget, that was passed. 21 amendments were included in that. There was no discussion, and from what we have been told, one of the amendments is related to basically grandfathering of unlisted of unlisted shares as far as LTCG is concerned. And secondly, you also have an amendment which basically ensures that PPF of a defaulter will not be confiscated or attached even if he defaults. But net, as I said, this is very, very rare to actually see budget discussion, especially the finance bill being passed without any discussion. I asked around and was told that perhaps only once this has happened before. But net, what has now happened is that the budget process, which was started on 1st of February by Finance Minister Arun Jaitley when he stood up to present the budget, that ended formally today. With that, it's back to you.
All right, Ritu, thank you so much for taking us through those details. On to the big national headline of the day. The BJP is staring at a huge setback in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar by-polls. The SP-BSP alliance is heading towards victory in UP, with the Samajwadi Party leading in both Gorakhpur and Phulpur seats. In Bihar, the RJD is leading in Araria Lok Sabha by-polls. Bhupendra Chaubey is joining in with the details. Bhupen, what's your take on the UP and Bihar by-poll results?
Well, every election does have some potent symbolism which is associated with it, and that's what we're seeing during these by-polls as well. Rather interestingly, if you look at the BJP's track record in by-polls since 2016, it has actually lost more by-polls than what it has won. But if you look then at assemblies, you look at what had happened in Tripura, or you look at what had happened in Goa, Arunachal Pradesh, the BJP's performance has been far better. So should we be extrapolating this as some kind of a national referendum or a national fiasco for the BJP? Most certainly not. But Having said that, what it does tell you is that it sets out a template for the opposition space. You have a scenario where for the first time in the last 3 decades, a seat like Gorakhpur in far eastern parts of Uttar Pradesh, the stronghold of Yogi Adityanath, the incumbent chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, and that's why this bypoll was being conducted in Gorakhpur, because he had to vacate that seat. That seat has gone out of his hands, out of the BJP's hands for the first time in the last 2.5 decades. Look at Phulpur, a seat which was won by BJP's deputy chief minister by a margin of over 1 lakh for the first time ever. That seat has gone away from the BJP, and again it's gone to the Samajwadi Party. The reason why that has happened is because Akhilesh Yadav managed to tie up with Bahujan Samaj Party. He managed to stitch a good caste coalition with some local outfits, some Nishad outfits, some non-Yadav OBC outfits, and it appears that on the ground, the entire vote of these respective parties has consolidated around one individual who was chosen as a joint candidate. If this experiment holds in 2019, then you're looking at a potent, formidable challenge against Narendra Modi. Otherwise, it could just well be another flash in the pan.
जनता के फैसले को हम स्वीकार करते हैं। जो ये जनता ने फैसला दिया है, यह अप्रत्याशित है। 2019 में सपा बसपा का जो यह राजनीतिक सौदेबाजी एक बार पुनः प्रदेश और देश के विकास को बाधित करने की दिशा से बना है, इसके बारे में हम लोग अपनी पूरी रणनीति तैयार करेंगे।
On that note, it is time for us to take a short break. But coming up next, special CBI court lets off the Maran brothers in the illegal telephone exchange case. More details on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're still with us on Reporter's Diary. A CBI special court has discharged Kalanidhi and Dayanidhi Maran in the illegal telephone exchange case. Remember, Dayanidhi Maran was accused of having installed a private telephone exchange at his residence to facilitate illegal uplink of Sun TV data, causing losses to BSNL and MTNL. Jude Sanit joins us now with more details. Jude, take us through the details of the verdict.
In what must come as a huge relief to the Maran brothers, a special CBI court in Chennai has discharged all 7 accused in the illegal BSNL telephone line case. Now remember, the case itself pertains to between 2004 and 2006, when both Kalanidhi and Dayanidhi Maran are accused of installing over 764 BSNL telephone lines in both their private residences and in the offices of Sun TV, causing an alleged loss, as the CBI stated to the Exchequer, to the tune of 1.78 crore rupees. Now, the discharge itself is crucial, since remember, it was only in October that the Marans had applied for a discharge petition in the special CBI court. But as late as just last month, the CBI contended that there is indeed prima facie evidence to proceed with the prosecution against both the Maran brothers. Now, interestingly enough, the court, while discharging the petition, did observe that there is absolutely no prima facie evidence produced by the prosecution, thereby casting aspersions on the CBI's investigation and of the case itself. And very interestingly, all 7 accused, including former BSNL officials and Sun TV and the Maran's personal staff, have also been let off by the special CBI court. So a victory indeed for the Marans in their pursuit and fighting of the case itself. Back to you.
So huge relief there for the Maran brothers. Thank you so much for those details, Jude. In fact, Jude also caught up with former Telecom Minister Dayanidhi Maran, and hear out what he had to say about the verdict.
In both the cases, the Justice Department found that this case is not fit to go for trial. Do understand that what does it mean? It means this case is so weak, they lacked evidences, they're just foisted on us just to defame us, just to put us in trouble, and to ensure that our party also gets a bad name. It was pure professional jealousy, political jealousy, and all this has fallen apart. Today, in the second case, today's judge said it is not fit for trial. It's not fit. There's no material for trial. It's a big blow to the CBI.
On that note, it is time for us to take a short break, but coming up,
I would not rest easy saying that we're done. I think there's more to come.
We have not seen the end of trade and tariff wars just yet, says former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan That exclusive chat on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned.